Welcome to Big Blue Sports. Again, I am your host, Matt Volz, a senior at Fredonia. I'm just sort of getting over being, I don't know if I was a little bit sick or what the deal was, but I have noticed that my voice is a little bit of a lower pitch. So, you know what? We're going to work with that. It is Thursday, November 6th. A handful of things to talk about, of course, the NFL trade deadline on Tuesday. The Bills do not make a move ahead of their Week 10 matchup against the Miami Dolphins. The Sabres are back in action tonight, and the Goatheads make their season debut as the Sabres host the St. Louis Blues at 7 o'clock. And we'll talk about Fredonia sports, of course, as well. A couple of teams competing in the SUNYAC playoffs this week. We'll start with the men's soccer team, of course, finishing as the sixth and final seed that gets into the conference playoffs. The men's soccer team went on the road and pulled off an upset victory in the first round, defeating Plattsburgh 1-0 last Saturday, with Ryan Ames scoring the only goal. That goal coming with less than 10 minutes left in the game as well, with the assist going to Chance LaCroix, Allegheny Limestone graduate, like myself. The Blue Devils, as the number 6 seed, advanced to take on the 2 seed Buff State Bengals in the second round. That game was yesterday afternoon, and a Buff State team that they finished second overall in the SUNYAC, that heavily because of 4 ties in conference play. But the Blue, that of course, putting them behind Cortland. But the Blue Devils ultimately fall 2-0 at Buff State yesterday. They were down 1-0 at the end of the first half. And then Diego Rivera, who has been an unbelievable scorer for Buff State, scoring his 26th goal of the season, put it out of reach. Bengals win at 2-0, so the men's soccer season comes to an end, but a phenomenal season it was. 8-7-4 overall, 4-4-1 in conference play, and they do get a win in the conference playoffs. So a phenomenal season, but the men's soccer season has come to an end. As for Buff State, they will face Oneonta. Oneonta going to Cortland and pulling off the upset in the semifinals. So Buff State will host Oneonta in the SUNYAC championship game on Saturday. As for women's soccer, they, of course, were at home in the first round of the SUNYAC playoffs, finishing as the number 3 seed in the conference, receiving a first-round home game. And in that home game, they faced Oswego last Saturday, and it was a thriller, going to double overtime before Bronwyn Madden scored the winner. The Blue Devils win it 1-0, despite being outshot 22-16 in the game. Fredonia wins it 1-0 to advance to the second round of the playoffs. They were on the road going to Plattsburgh yesterday, and Fredonia got off to a good start. Gabby Irwin scored just about 16 minutes into the game to put the Blue Devils ahead 1-0. But a very quick answer, as Kelly Licata would tie the game for Plattsburgh just 10 minutes later. And in the second half, in a 1-1 tie, a Sidney Myers penalty kick goal would put Plattsburgh ahead for good. The Cardinals win it 2-1 and advance to the conference championship game. The other game was not particularly close. Cortland taking down Buff State 5-0 to advance to the conference championship game. So Plattsburgh will head on the road to face Cortland at 1 p.m. on Saturday in the SUNYAC championship game. So both men's and women's soccer seasons have come to an end. The women's season ending with a record of 10-6-4, 6-2-1 in conference play. A team that only lost one game at home all season long. Certainly not a season that the Blue Devils can hang their heads on. Cross country also competing in the SUNYAC championships over the weekend, and the men's team has their first individual SUNYAC champion in 25 years. Stephen Hallberg after finishing third in the SUNYAC championships last year. He wins it this year. The Blue Devils have their first individual conference champion since 2000. Fredonia as a team finishing in second place out of 12 teams. The women's team, of course, was an incomplete. They did not score as a total team. So what's ahead? Regional championships, which Hallberg will be competing at, of course, will take place not this upcoming Saturday, but the following Saturday, November 15th, as those hosted in Rochester. And then if anybody qualifies for the NCAA championship, those taking place on Saturday, November 22nd, down in Spartanburg, South Carolina. So the cross-country regular season has come to an end. Volleyball getting closer to the end of their season. They still have 2 more games left to play. And so far as we take a look at their season, the Blue Devils 11-14 overall on the year. They are 6-3 though in conference play. Of course, they had a little bit of a win streak going from early October to just a couple of weeks ago. Blue Devils did lose a couple, including a loss to Hilbert, a barn burner of a game last night. The Blue Devils falling in 5 sets, 3-2 to Hilbert. But that, again, a non-conference matchup. Blue Devils have 2 games left on the season, neither in conference play. They host the tri-match with RIT and John Carroll on Saturday. The Blue Devils will face RIT at 11 a.m. John Carroll and RIT will face each other at 1, and the day will cap off with the Blue Devils facing John Carroll at 3 o'clock. Now, as for the SUNYAC, the Blue Devils have already clinched a spot in the conference playoffs. They finish 4th, and Fredonia will be at home in the first round of the conference playoffs. The Blue Devils will host Buff State on Tuesday, November 11th at 6 p.m. So that bracket is already set. Of course, they host Buff State. At the same time, the 3 versus 6 matchup as New Paltz hosting Morrisville. Whoever wins the Buff State Fredonia game will go to Cortland to take on the number 1 seed. The number one seed. That will be played on Friday, November 14th at 4 p.m. SUNYAC championship game will be played on November 15th. That's a Saturday at 1 p.m. Hockey has also started their season. A little bit of a slow start, an 0-3 start. Blue Devils began their season at home on Halloween with a 4-2 loss to Potsdam. Fredonia also fell 4-3 to Potsdam on Saturday. They were at Geneseo on Tuesday, losing 6-3. Fredonia with a home this weekend. They are at Chatham on Friday at 4 p.m. That's down in Pittsburgh. Fredonia home against Chatham at 7 o'clock on Saturday. Basketball teams have also started with some exhibition matchups. The men's team losing at Division II Dieuville, as the women's team begins their regular season on Friday as they play host to Thiel at 6 p.m. here in Dodds Hall. The men's team begins their regular season down in Erie against Penn State Barron at 7 o'clock on Saturday. Swim and dive also continuing their season as the men's team so far 0-3. They will be at home on Saturday for a tri-meet against the University of Rochester and Alfred. Women's team also hosting that tri-meet. That meet will begin at 11 a.m. Again, Fredonia, University of Rochester, and Alfred University. We're going to take a short break. When I come back, going to talk about the Buffalo Sabres, of course, in action tonight against the St. Louis Blues. Buffalo brings the goat head uniforms back to the ice tonight and tries to avoid overtime for the 5th straight game. Thanks for tuning in to Big Blue Sports on WCVF 88.9, the campus and community voice of Fredonia. Back in a moment. And welcome back to Big Blue Sports this afternoon. My sunglasses are on my head. That's not making it particularly easy to put my headphones on. Now we're good. Okay. It's just a natural instinct to keep my headphones on the top, or my sunglasses rather, on the top of my head. I'm just used to it, and then I try to put headphones on, and that doesn't exactly work. But anyways, do you like local music? Do you like reading zines? What if I told you there's something for you right here on campus? Rock a Little is an independent music zine based out of Fredonia. If you see a pocket-sized zine lying around campus, pick it up and take it home with you. You'll read articles covering local music releases, local shows, and other concerts in the area. Published once a month, Rock a Little also features interviews with people involved in the local music scene. For more information and updates, you can find Rock a Little on Instagram at rockalittle.zine. And I happen to know the editor of Rock a Little very well. Our very own music director here at WCVF, Justin Hook, is the editor of it. He does a fantastic job, so I definitely recommend checking that out. Well, the Sabres are back in action tonight, and we'll see if they can go to overtime for the 6th straight game. 5 games in a row for the Sabres have gone past regulation, and unfortunately for Buffalo, they've lost 4 of those games. But the Sabres are on a point streak because of all the overtime games. Buffalo has gotten at least 1 point in each of their last 7 games. And it should also be noted that they have gotten points in 9 of their last 10 following an 0-3 start. So as much as, you look at it and the Sabres have lost 4 out of their last 5, each of those 4 losses was in overtime, which is, I guess, both good and bad. I was at the game on Tuesday night against Utah, Buffalo falling 2-1 in overtime, as it was a defensive battle virtually the entire game. I mean, it was a scoreless game going into the third period, where Nick Schmaltz scored about 4 minutes in to put Utah on the board. And then a few minutes later, Noah Ostlund scoring his first career goal. That's the second time in the last week that a Buffalo Sabre has scored their first NHL goals. Of course, Isak Roseyan scored the first goal of his career last Saturday in the game against the Washington Capitals, a game that I was actually also at. Noah Ostlund, of course, was he was the first round selection that the Sabres took him with the first round pick they got from Vegas in the Jack Eichel trade. So that trade appearing to pay even more dividends for Buffalo, of course, as we know how good Alex Tuch has been as a result of that trade. So the game goes to overtime. Alex Lyon was very good in net for Buffalo, but the Sabres defense in front of them in overtime, not so hot. Clayton Keller skates in right past 2 Buffalo defenders and scores the overtime winner less than a minute into the extra frame. Sabres fall 2-1. They are 5-4-4 on the season. But the Sabres are back on home ice tonight, which is where they have excelled in this season so far. All 5 of their wins have come at home. The Sabres 0-2-2 on the road this season. They are at home to take on the St. Louis Blues tonight at 7 o'clock. And, of course, the Goathead jerseys are making their return to the ice. That's why I am wearing my Goathead jersey today. And I also got last Saturday's game against the Capitals was the annual Hockey Fights Cancer Night game. And each fan got a placard that, you write down somebody in your life, somebody who you know who has been affected by cancer. And everyone also got a Sabres Hockey Fights Cancer scarf as well. And for $35, you could buy a hat it's the goat head in the Hockey Fights Cancer colors, which is it's sort of like a light purple, I would describe it, almost like a pale purple. And it was a mystery autograph hat. So there was a sticker covering the autograph, and for $35, you could buy a hat and then see who your autograph was of. So obviously, I bought one for myself. I got Jack Quinn. I am wearing that hat today. And I bought one for Chloe as well, and hers was Ryan McLeod. I thought my dad was going to buy one, and then he didn't buy one, but whatever. So, you know, it was really cool. And I've always wanted to go to the Hockey Fights Cancer Night game because it is such a touching and really deep event. You know, it's you'll often hear me or anybody else say that every single person has been affected by cancer in some way, shape, or form. So when professional sports teams are able to host nights where everybody can sort of come together and really kind of comfort each other through that, it's really powerful. And in the middle of the third period, when during a TV timeout everybody held up their placards, it was incredibly moving. And now the Bandits do something similar, and the Bandits event is actually tailored towards a young kid by the name of Tucker Williams. Tucker died of lymphoma about a decade ago, and at the time when he was battling this disease, his father, Sean Williams, was playing for the Bandits. So they decided to host a night. It's called Tucker Out Lymphoma Night, and they've done it every single year. So they had last year, they started something called the Tucker Out Lymphoma Cup because the Williams family is very impactful in the National Lacrosse League. Obviously, the Bandits were the ones who started Tucker Out Lymphoma Night, but Sean Williams he's now retired from playing, but he is now the head coach and general manager of the Las Vegas Desert Dogs. And Dyson Williams, Tucker's brother, is now going into his second year playing for the Albany Firewolves. So every time last year that there was a matchup between two of Buffalo, Albany, or Las Vegas, it was a Tucker Out Lymphoma Cup game. And the Bandits won the Tucker Out Lymphoma Cup and then won the NLL Cup too. But it's a really, it means a lot to a lot of people. And the ceremonial puck drop at the game was done by a woman who she was telling her story. And this was a couple of years ago. Her and her husband, they have a daughter, and she was pregnant with her second child when she found out that she had a very rare and aggressive form of cancer. And it was such that within 48 hours, within 48 hours of her diagnosis, she was in surgery to have the cancerous mass removed. And it was very, very severe. But she was, because of the, again, amazing work that Roswell Park Cancer Institute does, she was not only able to safely have her child, which was their second daughter, she herself is also in remission. And she said that as of now, the doctors have told her that there is no evidence of cancer anymore in her body, which is, I mean, that's an impactful story. And she was the one who did the ceremonial puck drop, brought out, of course, the two captains, Rasmus Dahlin for Buffalo and Alex Ovechkin for Washington. They had their two daughters out there. it was really cool to see just the class of both Dahlin and Ovechkin going over to the family, talking to them. It was really, really cool. And then the Sabres ended up winning that game in a shootout, which was also cool. But yeah, it's Hockey Fights Cancer Night is truly one of the most special nights of the year. And I highly encourage anybody, if you can go next year or go at some point, I very highly encourage it. Of course, we here at Fredoni Radio Systems are no strangers to a collaboration with Roswell Park. Of course, in September every year, we host our annual event, Rockin' the Commons, which fundraisers go to the proceeds go to Roswell, I should say. But it's really an incredible event, and I was very glad to be able to go this year. The Sabres did, of course, win that game in a shootout. So Buffalo sitting at 5-4-4 on the season ahead of tonight's game against the St. Louis Blues. And Buffalo's got some injury concerns. The Sabres, of course, have been missing a few players for a little while. Josh Norris, of course, was injured very early on in the season. And Norris has not yet been back. He was injured in the season opener against the New York Rangers. The Sabres right now have two other forwards on injured reserve. Zach Benson is out with a lower body injury. He has missed the last two games. Jason Zucker also on injured reserve. He was placed on injured reserve ahead of Tuesday's game against Utah. And it looks like for the third straight game, the Sabres are going to be adding another forward to their injury report, as Yuri Kulik is it's an undisclosed injury, but according to Mike Harrington of the Buffalo News, Yuri Kulik is going to miss tonight's game against the St. Louis Blues. So the Sabres are going to have some of their other younger players step up. We have really seen that over the last two games with both Isak Rosen and Noah Ostlund. Of course, the two of them getting their first career goals, Rosen on Saturday and Ostlund on Tuesday. But both players have looked really good. I mean, Rosen looked very good on Tuesday as well. So the Sabres really need these guys to step it up and elevate their offense. Buffalo's defense has actually been very solid this year. The one that I have been the most impressed with so far this season is Matthias Samuelsson. Samuelsson is a guy who any regular listeners of the show know that he was somebody that I was really very frustrated with at a lot of moments last season. He has been phenomenal in a shutdown defensive role for the Sabres so far this year. Rasmus Dahlin has struggled a little bit, but as I've mentioned, and I remarked this to Chloe during the game on Utah as well, Rasmus Dahlin at 50% is still better than most defensemen at 100%. So not really any worries about that. Overall, I've been pretty impressed with Buffalo's defense, and I've been pretty impressed with the goaltending, too. I mean, Alex Lyon, of course, has done a phenomenal job. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen hasn't played much. He's only played 2 games since coming back from injury. But, I mean, he was in the shootout against Washington on Saturday. He was stellar, went a perfect 5 for 5. Bo Byram scored the winner in round 5, and Luukkonen allowed nothing in the shootout. He was absolutely terrific, and 2 of Washington's 3 goals, I mean, his defense completely hung him out to dry. But, the Sabres fell behind early, but were able to rally back and pick up the shootout win. So as far as who is going to be in goal tonight, not sure at the moment, but I would guess, and again, this is just my own personal guess, I would venture to guess that we're probably going to see Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen just because Alex Lyon played on Tuesday, and I think the Sabres are going to want to rotate their goalies. Buffalo going on the road after this game, going on the road, they will face Carolina and going to face a few other teams before coming back home to KeyBank Center shortly. But the Sabres, again, with some players missing games. You look at the forwards, and Buffalo's pretty banged up in their forward group. They've got, obviously the three that I've mentioned, Kulik, Zucker, Benson. Josh Norris is still out injured. So, I think there's a question of, will the Sabres offense be able to still elevate and step up even though they're missing a lot of their top players? And we'll sort of see how that goes tonight, The Blues, I will say the Blues did just play last night. They were in Washington against the Capitals, and Washington, of course, Alex Ovechkin scoring the 900th goal of his NHL career, the first player ever to score 900 goals. And, we'll see how St. Louis is off of a back-to-back. Sabres have had an extra day of rest, and it's not like they were traveling either because they were at home on Tuesday. Sabres home against St. Louis at 7 o'clock tonight. We're going to take a short break. The rest of the show, we're going to talk about the Bills. Of course, Buffalo deciding not to make a move at the trade deadline, which was on Tuesday. Bills are 6-2 coming off of a huge win over the Kansas City Chiefs. Buffalo on the road to face the Miami Dolphins on Sunday at 1 o'clock. Thanks for tuning in to Big Blue Sports this afternoon. We'll be back in just a moment. And welcome back to Big Blue Sports. The rest of the show today, we're going to be talking about the Bills because, of course, a huge win for Buffalo on Sunday. For the fifth straight regular season, the Bills have defeated the Kansas City Chiefs. The Bills take down KC 28-21. Buffalo, a 2.5-point underdog at home, a rare underdog at home in the Josh Allen era. Buffalo came into the game at 5-2. Chiefs came in 5-3. And Kansas City came in red hot. Buffalo, of course, also coming in off of a dominant win over the Carolina Panthers. And the Bills losing defensive tackle Ed Oliver for potentially the rest of the season. More unfortunate injury news for the Bills. So Buffalo received the opening kickoff, and just like they did in the opening game of the season against the Baltimore Ravens, Buffalo comes right down the field, and Josh Allen caps it off with a 23-yard touchdown pass to Dalton Kincaid. The Bills go 11 plays, 84 yards in 7 minutes, and immediately take a 7-0 lead. Chiefs would drive down the field until the end of the first quarter. First play of the second quarter, Rashee Rice takes the direct snap and runs it in for a 3-yard touchdown to tie the game. And it kind of, I won't spend too much time on this, but it kind of rubs me the wrong way when a lot of people are sort of, hailing and praising the return of Rashee Rice. They're like, oh, Rashee's back. This is so awesome. This is so great. Let's not forget that Rashee Rice was suspended for 6 games for reckless driving when he almost killed someone. Let's not forget that, okay, sure, we're praising him as the hero of the Kansas City Chiefs. Let's not forget that he was an idiot and almost killed someone. But anyways, the Chiefs then take the lead on a 46-yard field goal by Harrison Butker. Speaking of morons, the Chiefs take a 10-7 lead. Bills get the ball back, though, and put together a nice drive, a short drive, 5 plays, 70 yards. Ty Johnson caps it off with a 3-yard touchdown run to give the Bills a 14-10 lead. Then Buffalo has the ball, and the Bills' offense looked good in that first half. They were really humming. Buffalo coming down the field. Josh Allen barely gets over the goal line for a 1-yard touchdown. The Bills take a 21-10 lead. The Chiefs, though, they're not going away quickly. Patrick Mahomes airs one out for Hollywood Brown, who makes the catch. A huge tackle by Christian Benford at the 1-yard line saves 4 points for the Bills as Buffalo's defense makes an excellent goal line stand, and the Chiefs have to settle for a field goal. Buffalo leading 21-13 at the half. In the third quarter, stayed mostly that score, 21-13 Buffalo, for most of the quarter before the Bills came down the field and Allen runs it in for his second touchdown of the game. Going into the fourth quarter, the Bills have a 28-13 lead and are looking pretty good. But the Chiefs drive down the field at the start of the quarter. Kareem Hunt runs it in for a 2-yard touchdown. Hey, speaking of offensive playmakers who have extremely problematic pass that people should maybe stop celebrating because they, have very questionable and sketchy pass. Of course, Kareem Hunt previously in his previous Chiefs tenure was, faced legal repercussions for kicking his pregnant girlfriend. Just an upstanding citizen of society, if you ask me, but the Chiefs don't seem to care. He scores a 2-yard touchdown to cut the deficit to 7. Chiefs had the ball back. Patrick Mahomes airing one out deep, and the Bills' first-round pick, Maxwell Hairston, comes away with his first career INT. Hairston played a phenomenal game for the Bills and really showed his speed. He was able to stay with Xavier Worthy for a lot of this game and really shows why the Bills drafted him. Another player who had a fantastic game for Buffalo is Cole Bishop, their second-round safety out of Utah from last year. Did not have a particularly good rookie season, and his biggest 2 plays of this year were getting stiff-armed into the ground by Derrick Henry in Week 1 against the Ravens and a crazy one-handed interception that he had against the Saints in Week 4. Other than that, Bishop had not been very good. He played easily the best game of his career against the Kansas City Chiefs. 7 tackles, 1 tackle for a loss, 4 pass breakups. He was terrific in this game. The Chiefs had one final chance, one final Hail Mary shot to the end zone, and it was knocked down, incomplete. The Bills win it 28-21. They win their second straight game, go to 4-1 at home, 6-2 on the season. The Chiefs drop to 5-4. Kansas City has not been good outside of Arrowhead Stadium this year. They are 1-3 away from home. And, again, Josh Allen was excellent. 23 of 26 for 273 yards passing and a touchdown. Also had 2 rushing touchdowns. Allen set the Bills' franchise record for completion percentage in a game, completing over 88% of his passes. Meanwhile, Mahomes going just 15 of 34 in the game, the lowest completion percentage of his career. James Cook also had a very good game despite not finding the end zone. Still ran the ball 27 times for 114 yards. The Bills win it 28-21. Buffalo still right behind the New England Patriots in the AFC East. New England 7-2, the Bills 6-2, and then you get a very steep drop-off to the 2-7 Miami Dolphins and the 1-7 New York Jets. The Chiefs are third in the AFC West. Of course, the Broncos at 7-2, leading that division. The Chargers at 6-3, the Chiefs 5-4, and then you have the 2-6 Raiders, who have really struggled. A lot of people really hoping that the Bills were going to make a move at the trade deadline, and ultimately that did not happen. Brandon Beane deciding to stand pat. And, I don't know. I wish Buffalo would have at least gone out and added somebody. But that being said, I do also understand that it makes sense and it's probably better to not go out and overpay for somebody, especially if they were going to be a short-term acquisition. But for the Bills offense, this is what we're rolling with the rest of the year. The defense, however, sustains another major injury as Michael Hoyt, who was suspended for the first 6 games of the season, came in and in a game and a half had been absolutely terrific on Buffalo's defensive line. He had been fantastic. Hoyt tears his Achilles in the game against the Chiefs. He is done for the season, but I had to see, so I don't know if anybody else saw this. So typically when somebody has a major injury like that, they're carted off and immediately go into the locker room, right? That's typically what happens. Michael Hoyt, after tearing his Achilles, hobbles over to the sideline, sits on the bench, immediately knows his season is done. But instead of going to the locker room, Hoyt asks the medical trainers, he asks, can I sit on the bench for the rest of the game? Can I stay here? Michael Hoyt, with a blown Achilles, probably in a lot of pain, decides to sit on the bench and be with his teammates for the rest of the game and support his team as they go and beat the Kansas City Chiefs. That's a teammate right there. That's a leader right there. And I know we're not going to see Michael Hoyt suit up in a Bills uniform for the rest of the season, but I like this guy. I really like this guy. I think that was a very good signing by Brandon Beane. I think that he's going to do wonders for Buffalo in the future. Of course, not to be for the rest of this season as he is out injured, but we'll see how it goes. Michael Hoyt is still under contract with the Bills for the next 2 years, so he'll be back next year. But, just still some tough news. The Bills now down 2 defensive linemen for likely the rest of the year. Ed Oliver, it is possible Ed Oliver could be back for a potential playoff run, but we'll have to see where the Bills go with that. Buffalo 6-2. They are heading down to Miami to face the Dolphins. Of course, the Dolphins making the move last week to fire general manager Chris Greer. Mike McDaniel is supposedly going to be their head coach for the rest of the season, which is interesting, to say the least. So we'll see how that goes. Buffalo is a pretty heavy favorite going into that game. And again, the Bills 6-2. The Patriots have a tough test. They are taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So we'll see how that goes for them. Going to take a short timeout. When I come back the rest of the show, as always, I'll make my picks for this upcoming week of NFL action. Thanks for tuning in this afternoon to Big Blue Sports on WCVF. We'll be back to make my NFL picks in just a few minutes. And welcome back to Big Blue Sports. So for the final 5 or 6 minutes of the show today, I'm going to make my NFL picks for the week. Of course, Week 10 begins tonight as the Denver Broncos host the Las Vegas Raiders on Thursday Night Football. The Broncos 7-2, Raiders 2-6. I'm going to go with the Broncos in that game, but anything can happen. We do have another overseas game this week as the Atlanta Falcons take on the Indianapolis Colts at 9:30 a.m. I'm going to go with the Colts in that one, but that's another one that can kind of get a little bit unpredictable. Those overseas games can be a little bit fluky at times. The Sunday 1 p.m. games, Giants at Bears. The Bears coming off of a crazy win over the Cincinnati Bengals last week. Sometimes when teams have those wild, insane games, they kind of have a little bit of a lull afterwards. I'm going to pick the Giants to go with the upset, even though the Giants have not been very kind to me in the picks this year. We'll pick the Bills game last as per usual. The Ravens going into Minnesota to take on the Vikings. Lamar Jackson is back. I think the Ravens get the win in this one. The Browns heading to face the New York Jets. The Jets, of course, trading several key members of their team this past week with the trade deadline. And sometimes I think that can sort of spark a team. Weirdly, I think the Jets come away with the win in this game. 1 o'clock, this is going to be the game of the 1 o'clock window. The Patriots heading down to Tampa to take on the Bucs. I'm going to pick Tampa to win this game. They're coming off a bye week. I think that, New England off to a 7-2 start. I think you start to see the Patriots fall down to earth, and the Bucs get the win in this one. Saints at Carolina, 1 o'clock. I like what Carolina has been putting together outside of the Bills game, of course. I think they get the win in that game as well. Jacksonville at Houston, the last game in the 1 o'clock window. This one is tough because Houston has a very, very good defense. But Jacksonville, a solid team. They, of course, just added Jacoby Myers. I think the Texans get the win at home in this one. In the 4 o'clock window, only 3 games, Arizona and Seattle kicking off at 4 o'clock. The Seahawks, heavy favorites in this game, and understandable why. After they dominated Washington on Sunday Night Football last week, I think the Seahawks get the win to go to 7-2. Rams at the 49ers. This should be a good one. Rams 6-2, Niners 6-3. The Rams have looked really good. I think they get the win. Sunday Night Football, the Lions at Washington. This was a game that looked really, really good after, before the Jaden Daniels horrific arm injury on Sunday night last week. So I think the Lions get the win. We do have another, that is a 4:25 game as well. Sunday Night Football, the Steelers at the Chargers. This is going to be a pretty solid game. I think the Chargers get the win. And then Monday Night Football, the Philadelphia Eagles heading into Green Bay to take on the Packers. A great Monday night game at Lambeau Field. Green Bay is coming off of an embarrassing performance in their loss to Carolina on Sunday. I'm so sorry to do it, Chloe, but Chloe loves the Eagles in addition to being a Bills fan, of course. But I'm going to pick the Packers. I think Green Bay has got to get back on track, and they do. And, of course, the final game that we'll pick, Bills at Dolphins. Down in Miami, the Bills 6-2, the Dolphins 2-7. Need I remind you what usually happens when the Bills play? Chloe's mad at me. I don't know. I think the Packers will get back on track. But the Bills and Dolphins, do I need to remind anyone listening to the show what usually happens when the Bills play the Dolphins? Yeah. The Bills are going to get the win in that game. And I don't want to go in too overconfident, but I think this game I think Buffalo wins it by a fairly substantial margin. The Bills are heavy favorites in this game. To be exact, I can look at it. According to ESPN Sportsbook, the Bills a 9.5-point favorite for Sunday's game. That's not really a surprise. The Bills, according to ESPN Analytics, have a 70% chance of winning the game. I think Buffalo wins it, and the Bills pull into first place in the AFC East. That is all for Big Blue Sports this afternoon. I want to thank everyone listening at home, as well as everyone here at FRS who makes this show possible. We will catch you back here next week to hopefully recap a Bills win over the Dolphins, and of course talk about all other things Fredoni Sports. So thanks for tuning in to Big Blue Sports this afternoon. Local at 1 is next. Thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you all next week. We'll catch you then.